Hi, my name is Viviana Marquez, and today we're going to learn how to use in Excel VLOOKUP, index match, and XLOOKUP. So without further ado, let's get started. So here we are going to work with this very small data set. So what do we have here? We have a column called count, another one called employee ID, another one called name, age, department, and social security number. So when working in Excel and working as a data analyst, a lot of times you're gonna face situations where you have some kind of object each row and an unique identifier for that object. So in this case, our object are employees, so not objects, people, but anyway. So you have each one person on each row. And then a lot of times you want to be able to retrieve information about them using their unique identifier. So in this case, it could be either the employee ID or the social security number. So let's say, for example, your boss comes to you and says, hey, can you please give me the department for the employee ID 888? So your task is going to be to use Excel and find the department for employee ID 888. Since this is a very small data set, you can just look at the table and say, hey, the department for employee ID 888 is finance. But if you had a million rows, this will be impossible. It will be very, very difficult. And imagine that not only you have to do that, but you have to search not just ID 888, but several different IDs. So what is a smart way to do this in Excel? So introduce the VLOOKUP function. So the VLOOKUP function will help us achieve this result. So the VLOOKUP function searches for a value. So in this case, the 888. In the first column, so the column that contains this ID should be the first column, and returns a value in the same row from a specific column. So in this case, that specific column is the department, is the answer that we want to get. So this is how the VLOOKUP formula would look like. And let's look through each one of these parameters that the VLOOKUP function is expecting. So it's expecting the lookup value, the table array, the column index number, and the match type. So the lookup value is just the value that we're going to search for. So 888. This should be in the first column in the range that we're going to give it. So we're going to give it the range where you're going to search your data. Then we're going to have the number of the column where we're going to retrieve that information from. So in this case, that's going to be the number for the department column. And then you have an optional parameter. So that means that you don't always have to put it, which is the match type. So the match type means, okay, for this lookup value, do I need to find exactly that value, or can I find something that is the closest to it? So this is an optional one, but typically you will want to say that is an exact match. So you need to say false, because the default behavior is true, which means it's going to get an approximate match. And then the output is going to be the department in this case, so the value that you're searching for. So let's do it here step by step. And then in this purple square, we'll actually write out the formula and see if we get the correct result. So let's start with that first one. So what is the lookup value? We want to look up 888. Now let's go on to the table array. So the table array is basically just the range where you're going to search for. Typically, you would exclude the title row because you're not going to retrieve the answer from the title. So the range would be something like this. However, the issue by what I just did is that, remember, I've been saying with the VLOOKUP, the lookup value has to be on the first column. So if I do this range, we wouldn't find it because the first column is the count column, not the employee ID column. But that's not a problem because then we can select just this range. And in this way, the correct column would be all the way to the left. But now you can see why VLOOKUP has a limitation, because you're not necessarily always going to have that column all the way to the left. Let's say if we were trying to find an employee instead by their social security number, we will be in trouble because within the range, you also need to include where the answer is going to be. But no matter what we do, this column is always going to be to the right. And yes, sure, you could just grab it and move it. But a lot of times that's something you don't want to do, especially if it's a data set that you're sharing with other people, because they expect this column to be here, so you shouldn't be modifying it. Anyways, so going back to the table array, for us is going to be from B2, which is this first value, and the last value of our range happens on F6. So let's do that, B2 to F6. F6. So just here as a little note, so you remember, the employee ID has to be the leftmost column. Otherwise, it's not going to work, because this value that we're going to search for should be in the leftmost column of this range. Also, I could see someone thinking, well, if I only need the department, could have I done B2 to E6 and not select this one? Yes, you could have. As long as you include the column that has the answer, your range can be much smaller. I typically like to include as much as I can, because let's say someone tells me, okay, now don't give me the department, give me the social security number. I can just change the number of the column and the formula would still work, but completely up to you as long as you know what you're doing. Now let's go with the column index. So you might be tempted to say, okay, department is the column number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but that's actually wrong. And the reason why it's wrong is because it's relative to where you have your data. So in this case, you selected this range, which is from B2 to F6. So the answer is going to be in column 1, 2, 3, 4. So the department column is column number 4 relative to the range that we selected. So we want this 4. We don't want 5, we want 4, because it needs to be relative to the range that you gave. So for that reason, the index column is going to be 4. So we can get the department, which in this case is the 4th column in our selected range. And then for the match type, I'm going to write false, because I want an exact match. Whenever you're dealing with IDs, you do want an exact match. Because, for example, let's say you're searching for the information for employee ID number 124. You don't want an approximate match, because it will give you the information for employee 123, which would be incorrect. So you do want the information for employee 124. In what kind of situation you will want this to be true instead of false? So that means an approximate match. Let's say you wanted to hire, you work for HR, and you wanted to hire someone that knows 100% Excel. And maybe in your database of possible candidates, you don't know anyone that knows Excel to 100%, but maybe you have some candidates that they know Excel 90%, 95%, 99%. So you want to get the closest possible match, even if it's not the exact match. So if there's someone with 100%, it will give you that result. But if there's not, it wouldn't just give you an A, it would just give you the closest person. So someone with a 99% skills in Excel. But with IDs, typically you want that false. And the default behavior for this parameter is true, so we do want that false in there. So now let's write how the formula would look like. So the formula would look something like this. So VLOOKUP, in parentheses, the different parameters. So we know the first one is the lookup value, so 888, comma, the table array, it will be V2 to F6, or you can also just select it with your mouse, comma. The column index is 4, and the match type will be false. So this is how our formula is going to look like. Notice that I didn't write the equals, just so you could see how the formula is, but then we're actually going to write it. And what do we expect as a result? So we're going to look up the value 888 in this range, in the first column of this range. So it's this one. And we want to retrieve the value that it happens in the fourth column, where 888 happens. So 1, 2, 3, 4. The result should be finance. So now let's put it to the test. Now let's actually write that formula and see what happens. So we do equals to say, hey Excel, I'm gonna write a formula. So it knows that it's not text, it's a formula. And I start typing VLOOKUP. And this is something that I love about Excel, is that it gives you suggestions. So if you don't remember, for whatever reason, how to spell VLOOKUP, you can start typing and it will just tell you what it is. And it also tells you what the function does. So if you want to explore other functions, you can do that. But in this case, we're going to do VLOOKUP, parentheses. And here, something also pretty great about Excel is that it gives you this documentation of what each one of the parameters that are expected, and then a small example. So you need to know that the VLOOKUP function exists, in which kind of scenario you should use it. But you don't need to remember exactly what's the order of the parameters, because you can just use the Excel documentation. So you don't have to memorize that. Just know what is it used for and when to use it. So the first one is the lookup value, so 888, comma. The next one is the range, so I'm going to just select it with my mouse. In this case, notice that it said this. This is just, you could have also typed B2 to F6, B2 colon F6. It would have picked that up, but that's fine. Same thing. And then the next thing is our column index, which is 4. And the next thing is false. And notice that it tells you, okay, you only have these two options. So I'm going to click on false, close parentheses. And now drum roll. Let's see if that's going to give us the correct answer. And there you go. We do get the correct answer. And if you notice here, here's the formula for this. And it gave us the correct answer. So that's VLOOKUP in a nutshell. But what happens if, for example, your boss comes to you and says, hey, can you give me the department of employee, the employee with social security number A123? You would be in a bad position because this column is not all the way to the left. So you wouldn't be able to select a range where you have the social security number and the department as well. Sure, you could send this column all the way to the left. That could work. However, as I previously mentioned, I would not do this if you're sharing this data set with other people, because maybe that some people are using exactly that column and referencing that column, and you don't want to destroy their formulas as well. So what do you do in that case? So if you're working with an older version of Excel, you have to use two formulas to recreate the behavior of a VLOOKUP, but with that flexibility of selecting the column. So you have to work with match and index and combine them to be able to get the same result as the VLOOKUP. So I'm going to start explaining the match, then the index, and then how do we get the same result combining them. So let's take it step by step. So let's start with the match now. So for the match function, what does it do? So the match function searches for a specific value in a column and returns the relative position of that value within that column. So what are the parameters? So you have your lookup value. So let's say you still want to find employee ID 888, but in this case, we want to know where does that happen, in which row does that happen. So, so you have the lookup value. you will have the lookup array, so it's the column containing the data. Notice that I say lookup array instead of lookup column. That's because you could also look up in a row and you will get the column number, but since we're working with a VLOOKUP and not an HLOOKUP, I'm just gonna say column. And then again, you have the situation with the match type. But in this case, the match type is going to be either 0, 1, or -1, not false and true. That's just how this function was created. You can look up the documentation if you're not super sure. But since we do want an exact match, we are going to be using number 0. And the output is going to be the position of the value in the column. So let's do it together. So for the lookup value, what are we looking up? 888. So same as usual. Then for the lookup array, it's going to be this column, the column that contains that ID. So in our case, it's going to be B2 to B6. So column that contains employee IDs. Then the match type is going to be 0 because we want an exact match. So how is the formula? The formula is going to be just match the lookup value, which is 8888, the lookup array, which is B2 to B6, and the match type is a 0 because we want it to be exact. So basically it's going to look up the value 888 in this range, and what's going to be the result? So the result is going to be the relative position of that value. So if we count this in this range, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the result is going to be 88, so it's 3. The relative position of the value 888 is number 3. So that should be the result. So basically, which row does it happen? But notice that it's not the Excel row, it's the Excel row, it's the row, not the Excel row, the row where the value happens. So within that range that we specified. So we expect the result to be 3. And now actually let's test it and see if we get the result. So equals, hey Excel, I'm going to type a formula, equals match. So here we have match. The first thing is the lookup value, which is 888. The next thing is the lookup array, which I'm just going to select here. And the next thing is going to be exact match. Look at the Excel. I'm using Excel Online, by the way. This feature might not be available in other kinds of Excel, but here you have the options that you have. So I want an exact match. I close parentheses, I hit enter, and I get number 3. So we're halfway there because we need a combination of index and match to be able to get the same result as a VLOOKUP. So now let's go with the index. So what does the index function do? So the index function returns the value of a cell in a given range using row and column numbers. I call it the battleship function because let's say I give it this range and I say, hey, give me column number 2. So it was going to be this one. And row number 6. So it's going to be this one. And then, yeah, it will give you this result. So it will give you 965. So it's like a battleship function, I call it, because you give it the coordinates, the range, and it gives you that value. So that's the input that we're going to give it to our function. So the range, the row number that you want, the column number that you want, and it will, as an output, it will give you the value of the specific cell. So for this example, let's use row and column number to find the word finance. So in this case, let's do it. So the range can be anything. I'm gonna use the same range we have been using so far, but it could be anything that you want. So I'm just gonna say B2 to E6. or F6. So B2 to F6. And then the row number. So if this is my range, what is going to be the row number? So the row number is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the row number is going to be 3. And the column number is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because remember, for all these formulas, is relative to the range that you selected. So in this case, it's going to be 4. So let's have that in there. So 3 and 4. So the formula is going to look like index, my range. So V6, V2 to E6 or F6, depending on what you're doing, comma, the row number and the column number. And the result we're expecting is finance. So let's do the formula. Hey Excel, I'm going to write a formula. So I have my equals, index, and then the range, comma, the row number and the column number, and I close parentheses, and I get my result. So it worked. So you might be wondering, when would you use an index function? So in many situations, but in this case, how do you use it to recreate the VLOOKUP function? So if you notice, here we're doing something very similar where we're selecting a range, we're selecting a column, but we need row number to be able to get finance. So let's go on to the next tab. And in the next tab, it shows you what we're trying to do. So here we have, again, the same example that we did before. So how do you use VLOOKUP to find the department for employee ID 888? So here's the formula. If you look at it here, so we use the lookup value, the range, the column, and we want an exact match. But how do you do it with index and match? So you can combine index and match to get a more versatile lookup. So you will get the same result. So the first thing is that you would use the match function to find the row number of the lookup value. So you would do, okay, out of this column, give me what is the row that contains 888. So you will get that, okay, that's row number, in this case, relative to the selection, it will be row number 3. And then you can use the index function because you can give it the whole range, give it the specific row number, which we know from the max function is row number 3. And we do know the column because we want the department. And once you do that, you will get the same result, which is finance. So basically, you're going to be doing like a Matryoshka doll, where you have index, the range, all of this is the row number, and then the column number. But to be able to find that row number that originally we wouldn't know where it is, we can use the match function. So the match function searches in that column the lookup value. So you would put it like this, and here's a quick explanation of what's going on. So let's try it step by step. So let's do step number 1, which is use the match function to find the relative row number for employee ID 888. So I'm gonna make this slightly smaller just so you can see the whole data. Okay. So here, okay, so what is the lookup value? We're going to be using the match function in step number 1. So the lookup value is 888. The lookup array is the column that I want. So B2 to B6, which is this column right here. B2 to B6. So the column where I have my lookup value. And the match type is going to be 0 because we want an exact match. And then the justification for this one is that is the column that contains employee IDs. So the formula is going to be match 888, comma, the lookup array, which is B2 to B6, comma, exact match, and the result that we expect, again, if we are selecting this range, this column, and we're searching for value 888 is going to be 1, 2, 3. So it's relative to what we are trying to do. So that's going to be number 3 in here. So let's write that formula down. Equals match, and you have the lookup value, which is 888, the range, and you want an exact match. And there you go. You get number 3. So what is this number 3? The row number where 888 happens. And now step number 2 is that we use index to find the department. So we give it the array. So we can give it this range again, the same that we've been using so far. So B2 to F6. The row number is going to be 4, and is going to be 3. And how do we know it's 3? Because we used the match function. And then the column number is going to be column number 4, because again, within this range, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is the department column. And we do this. And the formula would be index B2 to F6, comma, row number, column number. So this is how a formula would look like, and the result that we expect is finance. So don't lose sight of what we're trying to do in this exercise. We want to find the department for employee ID 888. This is what you were given. And yes, you could search here the row number. You can count it manually. But if you had 1 million employees, it will be very hard to count the number row here manually and discover where 888 happens. So that's why you use the match function, because then you get the row number. And because you get that row number, if you combine the two of them, you can mimic the behavior of the VLOOKUP. So let's see here what happens when I do index. So index, my range, which is all of this range, comma, row number is 3, and column number is 4. And I get the result. But notice that here, instead of writing this 3 in the formula, I could have just selected this cell, which contains the formula for match. And it gives you the same result. Because notice that here in the formula, you don't have 3, you have 836, which is the cell reference. But this cell reference, if you click on it, it has the match formula. And you could do everything in a single step, which would be to combine the two things. Once again, as a refresher, if you're trying to find the department for employee ID 888 as a VLOOKUP, you would do VLOOKUP, the lookup value, the range, the relative column that has the answer, which is column number 4. And you have to say the exact type of match, which is false. You want the exact match, so that's why you put false. And then if you wanted to do it the index match way, to achieve exactly the same result, you would do index B2 to E6, comma, the row number, but the row number would be the match formula. So exactly what we had for the match formula. So for the match formula, we had 888, which is the lookup value. The column where that happens, V6, comma, 0. And then this is just the row number. And now the column number, which is column number 4. So we have these two here. Let's make sure that we actually get the same result. So equals, I copied the same formula. And then equals, I'm going to copy the same formula. And we get exactly the same result. So these two formulas are equivalent to each other. They're going to give you exactly the same result. So you might be wondering, why did I do all of this index and all of this match? So let me show you where the secret sauce is happening. So let's highlight some things. So in the VLOOKUP, you have the value that you want to search for, which is here as well in the match. Then you have the range, the whole range that you're going to work with, where pretty much your whole data. So here's your whole data. Then you need the column that contains the value that you want to extract. So in this case, the department, which is column number 4. And you want an exact match. So in VLOOKUP, you have to type false. If you're using match, you have to type 0. And that's it. So you see that you're using exactly the same parameters. But here's where the secret sauce is. This is what I wanted to highlight. So what is this? This is the column that contains the lookup value. And why is that the secret sauce? Because in the VLOOKUP function, we can't just say where that value that we're searching for is. The formula just assumes it's always going to be to the left of the range. But in here, it doesn't have to be to the left of the range. You have the freedom to say, hey, this 888 is going to be in this column. Search for it in this column. And it doesn't have to be the leftmost column. Of course, in this case, it's the leftmost column, so you can do the VLOOKUP and it will work, and you can do the index and match and it will work. It's a little bit of harder work. But in some scenarios, like the scenario of the social security number, you absolutely have to use something that is not a VLOOKUP. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to see a unique use of index and match. So far, we have learned how to combine index and match to mimic the behavior of a VLOOKUP. And the whole reason why we're even doing this is because, yes, you can recreate the VLOOKUP, but also VLOOKUP has that restriction where the value that you're searching for has to be in the leftmost column. But if it's not, what do? Then you combine index and match. So let's go with that example. So that's going to be to find the department for social security number DO12. So you can't use VLOOKUP because social security number column is all the way to the right. Yes, you could move it to the left, but let's say you can't because other people are using this worksheet. What do? So let's work through it step by step. So let's do step number 1, the match function. So what is the social security number that we want to find is DO12. And the lookup array, so where that value is happening is in this array here, in this column right here, which is F2 to F6. So it's going to be F2 to F6. And the match type, we want the exact match type. So exact match. And then this is the column that contains the social security number. So the formula would look something like this. You have the match, you have the lookup value. It has to be in quotes because it's text, so Excel recognizes it, comma, the lookup array, which is F2 to F6, comma, and the type of match. And the result, we're hoping that it says, if this is our range, what should be the result that we expect? 1, 2, 3, 4. The result should be number 4, which is the row, the relative row. So 4, which is the relative row number in our selected range. So let's copy this formula, equals with the formula, and we get the 4. And now we use index to find the department. So remember, this is the battleship function, so you can just give it the whole range. I'm going to say A, or let's just it doesn't matter. So let's just do A2 to F6. So A2 to F6, which is the whole range. The row number is going to be 4, but how do I know this? We know this from the result of our match function. And the column number, so if I do this, the column number, what would it be? Actually, so you can see the relative column number. I'm going to change the range again to B2 like I was doing before. So if this is my range, what's the relative column number for our social security number? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you want the relative column number that contains the answer, and we want to find the department for that social security number. So the department is column number 4. So let's do that. The formula would look something like this. It would look like index B2 to F6, comma, row number, column number, and the result that we expect is that if this is our range and we have row number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then column number 1, 2, 3, 4, because that's what we have here, 4 and 4, we get marketing. So we expect the result to be marketing. So let's see if this actually will work. So let's try this formula. We are hoping to see marketing. And we see marketing. So if we tried to do it with a VLOOKUP, let's just think about it for a second. So VLOOKUP. And for the VLOOKUP, you need your lookup value at first. So it's D012. And then you need the range. But you absolutely need to start with the column that has the lookup value. So you would need to start with this column that has the social security number. So it will be F2, 2, but you will be stuck because you can't really select the department because this needs to be all the way to the left. So you couldn't do this. And then comma, well, sure, you could select what column, because you were not able to select the column, so you can't say the column number, and the match would be false, but you can't do the VLOOKUP. Meanwhile, with the index function and the match function, do index or array, which is B2 to F6, comma, the row number, which is our match function, so our match function, and then we have the column number relative to this range, so it will be 4. And then for the match function, what do I need within the match function? The match function is going to give me the row number, so that's why I put it here, because that's what index is expecting. But how do I build this match function? So we need the lookup value, which is 012, D012, the column where that exists, which is the column F, and we want an exact match, so that's why I put the 0. So this boy here, this F2 to F6 that I was able to determine to be able to extract the lookup value, is what allowed me to use this index match combo. So this is the secret sauce. This is why this combo is better. So you can do the formula. Let's copy and paste the formula. And you get it. So it doesn't matter where the lookup array is. That means the column that contains the value that you're searching for, because you can just specify it here within the match function, which you can't do with a VLOOKUP. So we get our marketing formula. So that's if you're working in an older version of Excel. In newer versions of Excel, it's actually way much easier. You can use a function that is called the XLOOKUP. The issue is that it's only available in Microsoft 365, Office 201, and Excel Online. So if you have an older version of Excel, you have to use this combo. It's also good to know this combo because even if you have a newer version of Excel, maybe you're working with an older Excel file from one of your colleagues and they use this formula, and you should be able to understand what it means even if you're not writing it. So unlimited reasons to learn this combo, but if you want the easy way and you have a modern version of Excel, you can use XLOOKUP. So the XLOOKUP is very intuitive. So you have the lookup value. So in this case, let's say we still want to find the department for Social Security number DO12. So you will have the lookup value, which is DO12. The lookup array is the range of cells that contain that data that we're searching for. So it will be this column. And the return array is the column that contains the result that we want. So in this case, is the department column. And the output is going to be the same row for the lookup value, but on that return column. So in this case, it's going to give us marketing. So what is the lookup value? DO12, which is what we've been working on. The lookup array is where this DO12 is. So in this case is F2 to F6. And the return array is where that answer is going to be coming from. So that's going to be the department column. So that's going to be E2 to E6. And the formula would look something like this, XLOOKUP. For me, it's going to work because I'm on Excel Online. So if it doesn't work for you, maybe it's that you have an older version of Excel. So I put the lookup value in quotes because it's text, so you don't confuse Excel. The lookup array, the return array, so the column that contains the results. And there you go. So I have my lookup value is D12. The lookup array is this one. So I'm going to search in this column the value DO12, which is this one. And then the return array, so the column that has the results, is this one. So the final result is going to be the result that is on this column on the same row as the lookup value, which in this case is marketing. So that should be our result. So that's marketing. And let's test it. And since it's the last formula we're going to be doing, this deserves a drum roll. And we do it, and we get marketing. Fantastic. So now you have learned how to find values using VLOOKUP, using index and match as a combo, and XLOOKUP. So you can do exactly the same thing with a VLOOKUP, an index match, and an XLOOKUP. But also some things that you wouldn't be able to do with a VLOOKUP, you can do using index match or using an XLOOKUP. So thank you so much, everyone, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!